Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Abaddon. So Abaddon, or I know some people say Abaddon, is mostly a support hero who sometimes gets played as an offlaner or even a carry at times, but for this video I'm going to be mainly focusing on the support version of Abaddon because that's really the most popular right now. Maybe if a core version of the hero becomes more popular, I will make a separate guide for that. But regardless, Abaddon's one of the best healing and save supports in the entire game, but unlike a lot of other healing and save supports like Dazzle or Oracle, Abaddon doesn't always just want to sit in the back of fights and save people and heal people, because he also can be extremely tanky and annoying to kill. So Abaddon is really all about finding the balance between tanking spells for yourself while also not just feeding so that you can effectively save and heal your allies when they do get initiated on. But before we can understand how to play Abaddon, we have to take a look at his abilities. Now for Abaddon's abilities, they're all pretty straightforward and easy to understand. The first one is Mist Coil, and this is an offensive and defensive ability, so you can see the AoE there. It's not super long, but you basically just shoot out a projectile at an enemy, and then it does damage to them. That's pretty straightforward. But in addition to costing mana, which you can see down there, I do have free spells on, so you won't see the mana go down. It also costs health, so you can see my health decreases. So this is a little bit of a consideration, especially in the laning stage when you're a little bit less tanky, you don't have as much regen. When do you want to be using this? Because even though it's good for trading, you are damaging yourself, so just keep that in mind. But it does synergize with the ult, which we'll take a look at in a second, and I'll mention that when we get there. But this ability also is good for healing allies, so you don't just use it on the enemy to do damage, you can also use it on your ally there, and you can see I'm healing the axe, which it's a pretty significant heal, and it's a pretty low cooldown spell that you can use many times in a fight, many times in the lane, etc. So that's Mist Coil. It's pretty straightforward. Then we have Aphotic Shield. So this is a shield that you can place on yourself or on an ally, and you can even place it on a creep. And the shield basically protects from some incoming damage. So we actually gave this axe a Divine Rapier, and you can see when he clicks the shield, it ends up popping. It gets deleted because he has a bunch of damage, but if we drop the Divine Rapier and we put the shield on this axe, we can see that, it takes a few hits to actually get rid of the shield. And then once the shield is, dispelled because it loses all of its HP, then it pops in an AoE and does some damage to the axe. It also does damage to creeps, basically anything in that AoE. And you can also recast it on a hero that already has the shield to pop the current shield and refresh it. So you can see there, I just popped a new one on there, and everything in that AoE took some damage. So this shield is pretty good, obviously, for defensive capabilities, for giving, a little bit of tankiness to a hero, and also for doing some damage. But honestly, the biggest thing that this ability does is it dispels. So we can put this debuff on the friendly axe here, and then we can see that when you cast the shield, it ends up dispelling the axe. So this is great for saving allies for any kind of, damage over time, slows, any dispel that's going to be applied to you or your allies. You can use this to kind of just completely get rid of that. So it's a great save. It provides them with that extra tankiness, and then you're also doing this a bunch of times in fights as well because it's really low cooldown when it's maxed out, so you have a save over and over again, where some of these other heroes that have big saves, they're longer cooldown spells. Now, later in the game, the amount of damage that this is giving for tankiness isn't the best. It's not amazing, so it's more about the dispel later into the game, but still that extra click or two is pretty good even later into the game. So that's Aphotic Shield. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. Then we have this passive. This is almost more of a core thing for Abaddon, so the support version of this hero doesn't really use this all that much, but it is something that can be effective. It's the last thing you're going to max pretty much every time, and really all it does is when you click the enemy, they're just slowed. So you can see the axe just has this debuff, and it's a pretty short debuff, and he's slowed for a little bit. And so that's pretty decent. It's also attack speed slow, not just movement speed slow. So because you are a pretty tanky hero, you can get in the front lines, maybe hit the enemy core with this debuff, and it ends up actually doing some, effectiveness in the fight to make the enemy core not as strong. So that's something you can use. It's just not a main focus of the support version of this hero. And then lastly, we have Borrowed Time, and this is what makes the hero tanky. It's what makes the hero able to get into the fights. It's what makes the hero able to even use this as a support, because for the most part, if you didn't have these two spells, you would pretty much just be sitting in back, hitting your spells on the allies that you needed to save and heal. And really what this does is if we give Axe the Divine Rapier again, and we have him click the Abaddon, you can see after Abaddon takes a certain amount of damage, he pops his ult automatically, and then every time he takes damage, he gets healed. And then the ult is obviously going to be on cooldown. If we have, if we turn free spells off, we can see, watch, it's going to automatically pop. And there we go. Now it's on cooldown, and it lasts for a certain amount of time, and then I'm healed all the way up. So you can see how this kind of synergizes with Mist Coil, because when he gets attacked and he has his ultimate popped, which we'll refresh here, you can then use your Mist Coil to do damage or to heal, and you heal yourself because taking damage actually heals you. So that can be kind of one of those things that you're combining together in a very, very good way to make sure that you can frontline, tank, and then heal yourself even when you're doing damage, which is really, really good. The other thing is you want to keep in mind that this is great against uncontrollable AoE damage. So any hero like Leshrac would be a great example, who just presses abilities and does damage in an AoE that can't really be controlled. That is really, really good for Abaddon, because whenever this is popped, you're automatically going to be healed up, because a lot of times people will just try to ignore Abaddon when your ult is popped and you're low health, because then they know you're just going to heal and they want to kill you after it's over, or they'll you know, Yules you or something like that, or do some other, you know, way to get you out of the fight, or just, you know, suspend you for a little bit with like an OD Astral Imprisonment or something like that until your ult is over so that they can then kill you. So that uncontrollable AoE damage is really good if the enemy has that once you have your ultimate. The other thing to keep in mind, the last kind of small thing, is that you don't have to wait for your ultimate to actually trigger automatically. You can just press it whenever you want if you feel like you're in a situation that you would need it. And that is because you actually can die from being broken. So let's get Silver Edge on this axe, and we will use this, and then we will see that you actually die because it doesn't automatically pop when you're broken. So that can be very important, because if you get broken and then stunned, or broken and then silenced, you actually don't have the ability to pop this. So sometimes you want to preemptively pop it, or maybe you want to pop it a little bit early. The other thing is, if you get bursted by like a Lina or some other huge crit or a lion, it can actually go through the threshold where it kills you before your ult is popped. So there are some weird situations like that where you actually want to use this before it just gets automatically triggered. But actually the biggest one, that is the biggest situation where you want to use this, is actually with the Ags, because this is something that you're going to be buying in every game if you can get there. Yes, it is a big purchase, but it's a really, really great Ag. So let's have this axe attack. Basically, whenever he takes a certain amount of damage, he ends up getting healed. If we give this guy a heart, let's just give this guy a heart. Let's do this. Now it's going to be a lot harder for this guy to heal. He has enough HP, so this makes sense. But like you can see, this is really, really good for healing a tanky player or any player you want to save. And basically you can go up, you know, you're going to be pressing this on him, you're going to be pressing this on him, and then you're going to be ulting as well. It's going to be very, very hard for the enemy to bring down any hero that has all this combination of save and heal that you're using on your ally there. So that's something you really want to be focusing on. That's when you're going to be pressing this for the most part, when it's not going to be automatically triggered. Then for the shard, this isn't as big of a deal, but Mist Coil also deals attack damage. That's more of a core thing. It's not something you're really going to be benefiting too much when you actually are playing support. It's really a core thing. But again, you can still use this if you do get it as a support, but it's just not the best. Then also, I'm going to be very quickly mentioning the passive and the facets. Basically, the passive is almost just more of a core thing as well, but you can also use it offensively as a support if you can get in there and click a hero like a Morphling or some of the hero that relies on regen, because basically anytime an enemy is below 40% HP, if you click them, their regen, their healing, lifesteal, all that kind of stuff is lowered by a lot, 35%. That's pretty significant. So it's kind of just like an anti-regen hero with this passive. But really the biggest thing is this quickening facet is the one that's kind of the default. It just makes the Aphotic Shield do what it normally does, and then you just get more spells, because anytime a unit dies, you get lower cooldowns. But really the thing to look at here is the other facet. So if we just go to Abaddon, we change loadout real quick, we return to demo with Mephotic Shield, or Mephetic Shield, sorry, for the Aphotic Shield. Basically, this makes the shield do something pretty similar with Dispel, so its main thing that it does is not really changed at all. It's just that when you do press it on somebody, they end up getting like this pseudo blade mail. So actually we'll get rid of the Divine Rapier there for a second. So they get this pseudo blade mail. So now instead of like popping at the end, the enemy actually takes damage every time they attack. And you can see there the end doesn't actually pop. So you don't get that damage in an AoE, and you also don't get that damage from reapplying it either. You just reapply it and then it just refreshes. So it can be better or worse depending on the patch, depending how strong it is comparatively. But for now, the default version of the hero is really the one that most people are playing. So that's Abaddon. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. Now, the laning stage for Abaddon is really all about his shield. And sure, you have a decent nuke and heal, but it's not the best ability until you get a few more points in it. And you also don't have the health pool to spam it early on. So you're mainly going to be using that for healing your ally when they are low, when they don't have tangos anymore, or for just that last minute save, that last minute damage if you're getting aggressive or you're defensive and retreating. For the most part though, you're going to be focusing on using your shield for everything in the lane. You're going to be using it on yourself when you're in the jungle, dewarding or warding or contesting any kind of pull. That's really what you're going to be doing it because you want to get aggressive, you want to tank, and you want to be better at trading. Or you're going to be using it on your ally if they're getting gone on or if they're getting aggressive, just to give them a little bit of extra tankiness, maybe a dispel if you have like a Veno in the enemy lane or something like that. It's really, really good against certain matchups for that dispel as well. So that's really the focus of the hero through that early part of the game, using it aggressively or defensively with that shield to just make the lane more, tanky, more resilient, and able to have a better lane against certain kinds of matchups. Then, after the laning stage, your hero is really all about saving allies and frontlining for your team. Once you get your ultimate, it can be extremely annoying for the enemy to try to kill you, and at this point in the game, they don't have a lot to continuously chase you down once your ultimate is popped. They don't have Yules, they don't have a lot of mana for their spells, they don't have a lot of items that give them mobility. These things are a lot more difficult for them early on, and so your ultimate is really, really good for frontlining, for baiting, for doing all these things that, even as a 5 position with no items, it's not something you can usually do. It's mainly, an offlaner's role at this point in the game, 10, 15 minutes, but you're great at doing that early on once you are 6. Just be sure that you're not using your ultimate and wasting it for no reason, because it's not a super long cooldown, but it is enough that they know once it's popped, you're like kind of just food. You're an easy target to go on. They don't really have to concern themselves with you anymore, and you have to play very differently when your ultimate isn't up than when it is up. You can be a little bit more aggressive, so just keep that in mind, because you do want to be kind of sitting in the back a little bit because you want to be spamming your spells. If you can stay alive in a fight, you're going to be shielding, you're going to be healing, you're going to be doing so much for your team that they kind of do have to deal with you in some way. So that's why you want to be at pretty much every fight, sitting behind a core, sitting near a core. You don't just want to be, off alone doing something by yourself, unless you're really pushing a lane that no one wants to be at and everyone's just farming, because you are so effective when you're paired up with your allies to save them from ganks or to push towers and just give that extra tankiness and ability to just be resilient to your teammates so that they are stronger than what they otherwise would be without you. Then in team fights a little bit later in the game, you mainly do want to play as a support in the back line. You're not going to want to front line the later the game goes, and you really want to be just spamming spells in that back line because you're going to be easier to deal with, you're going to be easier to kill, and you're not going to be nearly as tanky. You're going to get caught out, that kind of stuff. And you want to stay alive, and you want to shield people and dispel them, and that's how you're mainly going to play. So there is a bit of a transition from that, late laning stage, early game into the mid game where you are frontlining, you are tanking, you're soaking a bunch of spells, you're also using your abilities, and then transitioning, 25, 30, 40 minutes into the game, now you're becoming more of a backliner. Now you're just sitting there waiting to use your abilities. You don't really want to show and fog, and you just want to make sure you're buffing up your team as much as possible, because hopefully at that point as well, you are getting a few items like a Solar Crest, maybe even a Pipe, maybe Greaves, maybe a Force Staff, whatever it is to help your allies. You have these other things where you want to stay alive in fights. You don't want to be using your ult early, and you don't want to be caught out and killed because you are so valuable to your team for buffing them up, for saving them, that kind of stuff. Then in the ultra late game, you're really going to be focused around your ags, and basically you obviously want to be pressing your abilities and some of your other items on allies or yourself, but your main focus is going to be sitting in that perfect middle spot where you're not too far back and you're not too far forward. You don't want to be tanking every single spell yourself, but you also want to be close enough to allies that are going to get initiated on that you can press your ultimate, even if you are full health, to just heal them up and save them a ton, be able to use your shield, your heal, your ultimate, all that kind of stuff. And it's really going to be almost impossible for the enemy to single out a target and kill them when you have your ultimate up and when you're sitting right behind them and you're not getting gone on yourself. And so that's really what you're going to be focusing on with this hero. So you do have some skill in positioning. It's not just as simple as sitting in the back and using your abilities. You have to kind of maintain this balance between not being too far forward but not being too far back. And that's really the main aspect of the hero, especially as the hero transitions into the late game, because earlier game you're tankier when you have your ult, and then the later it goes, the more you want to sit in the back. But then once you have your ags, you need to be at this middle position, because if you're too far away, your ags won't really save them. You won't be able to use it, and it will pretty much just be completely wasted, and you won't have any effect in the fight if you're not really using that ags to its full ability. And that, everyone, is my Abaddon guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.